What's good, people? It's your favorite bearded host, CJ Williams. Today we're tackling the dreaded sophomore slump and seeing who lays claim to the biggest belly flop in the game. Now, before you accuse us of pulling these picks out of thin air, let's go over the short criteria. How good was their debut? And what's the gap between their first and second albums? Easy enough, right? These questions and more answered on this week's episode of Culturalist Theory. Yo, if you're feeling the content, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons and share it with a buddy who you know will respect it. Alright, now that that's out the way, let's get to it. Number 10, Mos Def, The New Danger. Coming out of arguably the most prolific borough in New York, Yasin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, hit the industry one of the best debuts the game has ever heard. Following a 5-year gap to strengthen his interdisciplinary resume, Bey would roll out his highly anticipated follow-up. By this point, however, it was clear that he had become disenchanted with the industry, putting as much distance between himself and the mainstream as possible. We'd be lying if we said the album ended up on the list due to the drop in artistic quality. While his infusion of blues and rock material significantly shifted our rubric for grading the album, there's no denying that Yasin failed to match the peaks of Black on Both Sides. The New Danger's inclusion on this list can be attributed to equal parts replay value and residual impact. Even falling short of his debut, the album still houses some of his best material, including tracks like Modern Marvel, The Panties, and the Boogeyman song. The album is a much more cohesive blend of various genres, with the reluctance to lean on samples giving it a more organic and spontaneous sound. Labeling it psychedelic soul, however, lets us know that critics were just as confused as we were when trying to place it in a more concrete box. It also didn't help that producers like DJ Premier and Ali Shaheed Muhammad didn't reprise their roles despite contributing stellar performances to Black on Both Sides. Yes, it does check all the boxes for a prototypical sophomore slump, but we still highly recommend giving it a spin. Just don't expect to come across a Miss Fat Booty level banger on the nearly 75-minute LP. Number 9, G-Unit, Terminate on Sight. 9 months after 50 took the industry by storm with Get Rich or Die Tryin', he and fellow rappers Lloyd Banks, Young Buck, and Tony Yayo would literally have the rap game begging for mercy. Well, Yayo was in prison at the time, so while he only appeared on 2 of the album's 19 songs, his presence could be felt nonetheless. Beg for Mercy would sport iconic tracks like Smile, Eye for Eye, and I Smell Pussy, with not so subtle shots at Murder Inc.'s entire roster at the time. Fast forward 5 years, damn, them 5-year intervals looking like a bad omen, and the group, along with leader 50 Cent, had lost nearly all the momentum they had accrued up until that point. They ditched the XXXs, Yayo played a more prominent role following his release from prison, and Buck's uneasy involvement on the project caused more harm than good. Yayo, Banks, and 50 would all go on to describe the album's sound as the aggressive spin-off to Beg for Mercy. But after hearing Kitty Cat, we're convinced the only aspect of the album that was aggressive was the restraining order our ears filed after hearing that monstrosity. Shame on you, Hit Boy. So while the extrinsic pressures of evolving competition, namely Kanye West, could be seen as a reasonable explanation for the album's haphazard execution, we think the unit's internal chaos ultimately played the biggest role in their collapse. Game had been inducted and kicked out of G-Unit before ever seeing a group release, while Buck, who was initially seen as a replacement for Yayo, would then lose his starting spot due to excessive spending and, quote, inconsistent behavior. As impactful as their debut was, if T.O.S. was following up one of those G-Unit mixtapes, best believe this slump would be a lot higher on the list. Number 8, Mase, Double Up. It can't be a good sign when an artist announces an album, then retires just before its release. Yes, you heard that correctly. 2 months before Double Up's June 1999 release date, Mase retired to become a preacher. My man threw in the towel before the fight even started. After hearing the album, we completely understand. Pastor Betha is on record saying he wasn't in a good space making this album as it has more darker tones. He elaborated, noting that death was all around him. After Biggie, Pac, and others passed away, he was weary of those in his circle. You can hear the paranoia themes in skips like Stay Out of My Way and F Me, F You. We know before the M.A. $sign he was Murder Mase, so we're cool with the edge, but the game was clearly getting to him. Another common occurrence on the project is poor production. No matter what, Do It Again and Getting It aren't just bad looking back, they were ass in 1999 too. Seriously, the album sounds like at least 3/4 of it were leftovers from his far superior debut Harlem World. Think Jay and Kel's unfinished business project. Yes, that bad. For the quarter of the album that's decent, check out Make Me Cry, Same Niggas with Carl Thomas, From Scratch featuring bad boy newcomers Shine and Loon, and the Blackstreet Assistant Get Ready, but even the latter two are copies of records done much better on the debut. If going from quadruple platinum and Rap Album of the Year Grammy noms to barely sniffing gold and retiring doesn't scream slump, then we don't know what does. And let's not discuss his comeback album in '04, Welcome Back. That wasn't hitting on nothing either. Mase low-key might belong in that one album wonder discussion. Sounds like a list. Let me put a pin in that. Number 7, Lil Kim, the Notorious KIM. 80% of this list could be categorized as artists who came out the gate too strong or those who felt the need to prove they could do it on their own. Kim, however, well, she's part of the other 20%. We do agree that the album is more creative than her debut, but track for track, Notorious loses that highly coveted triple crown: commercial sales, critical love, and cultural impact. Kim challenged herself artistically, yielding a more compelling insight into Kimberly Jones as a person. So while Queen B had highlights on joints like Hold On with MJB, Queen Bitch, Part 2, and Suck My Dick, it was clear production was down from 4 years ago. Her presence in the booth hadn't faltered, but time has not been too kind to the trajectory era she found herself in. To the fans that were waiting for the album to drop, do y'all remember Kim getting that Nasir Jones treatment? During the summer of '99, a dozen tracks off the Notorious KIM were circulating on file sharing sites. So Kim jumped back in the studio and cranked out nearly a dozen more in just 3 weeks. Unlike Nas though, Kim's disruptive version came before she could prove her debut wasn't a fluke. Despite its inclusion on this ranking, the Notorious KIM still holds her records for first week sales and Billboard peak. Don't get it twisted, 70% of hardcore is still a respectable showing. Number 6, Roddy Ricch, Live Life Fast. Roddy's ascension to the top was as impactful as it was abrupt. He built momentum with the Feed the Street series, but Ballin', that joint he got with Mustard, that really set the tone. 4 months later, he would deliver Please Excuse Me to meteoric levels of success. The Box went diamond after camping out at the number 1 spot for nearly 3 months. The album saw more success as a debut than any project not named Get Rich or Die Trying. So how did he manage the leap from most improved to most valuable? From the looks of it, he came into training camp out of shape. Late at Night wasn't a bad lead single, but when comparing it to hits like High Fashion, Start With Me, and Tiptoe, Roddy failed to capture that same infectious energy that catapulted him to a new wave of West Coast rap. In a strange case of suffering from success, Ricch may have had too many resources at his disposal. He got his money's worth with those Future and Lil Baby collabs, but between the formulaic delivery and stale material, Roddy feels like the weak link on his own album. If we had to pinpoint our biggest concern for the project, it would be the latent potential hinted at on songs like Pay My Dues, Slow It Down, and Late at Night. Admittedly, our expectations for the Takeoff collab are a bit skewed by hindsight bias, but there's no explanation for that 55-second Ty Dolla and Alex Isley. Everybody knows if you're getting Ty vocals, it's a 2-hook minimum. Is it true that the expectations for Live Life Fast were unrealistically inflated? Sure. Do we feel like Roddy did everything in his power to meet them? Of course not. We're not going to jump the gun and write him off for good. After all, the dude's only in his mid-20s. Having said that, he needs to reclaim some of that lost ground on his next album. We'll see if he evolves or goes extinct. Number 5, Nicki Minaj, Pink Friday, Roman Reloaded. Pink Friday, Roman Reloaded is such an ambitious and overzealous mixture of pop and EDM that fans didn't question her rolling out Pink Friday 2 despite having a clear-cut sequel already been released more than 10 years prior. 2012 would be a confusing time in Nicki's career, sandwiched between two peaks that saw significantly better releases. There are still moments from Reloaded that we revisit, songs like Right By My Side, I Am Your Leader and Champion. Even dated hits like Starships and Bees in the Trap evoke a nostalgic remembrance of a more playful period in rap. A lot of fans from the first installment could have told you the LP's 13 entries seemed to be the outlier limit of what she could juggle, making Roman Reloaded's 19 songs look like an impossibly tall task. We get it, those pop hits brought home the big bucks, but to incorporate that 2012 pop sound on a larger scale certainly meant that the artist was only concerned with immediate success. Those dubstep hits had expiration dates on them before they were even mixed and mastered. On paper, the album is supposedly a 50-50 split of hip-hop tracks and dance cuts, with Stupid Ho wrapping the project up. The split was more like 65-35, but who's counting? Nicki's downfall, however, encompasses more than a surplus of overproduced beats. She lacked the charm and world building that the first Pink Friday had in droves. The cohesion we got on her debut not only made the songs feel interconnected, it helped the eccentric parts of her artistry to positively contrast her skills as an MC. Her ability to make hits may have seemed more potent, but what she gained in virality she sacrificed in replay value. Apple Music credits her essential output as the albums that preceded and immediately followed this project, and we would have to agree. Lastly, we don't know what process went into the song selection, but the re-up definitely served as inspiration for the Scary Hour editions of For All the Dogs. All of the best songs from the project came from her work with Boy Wonder. While she had not one but two disappointing link-ups with Wayne on the standard cut, just a reminder that quality beats quantity every day of the week, and twice on Fridays. The Game, Doctor's Advocate. The documentary minus 50 Cent and Dr. Dre. If we're keeping it a buck, 50 Cent's The Massacre was in serious consideration to make this ranking. Again, not due to poor quality per se, more so because of the heights that 50 wasn't able to recreate. After their success and subsequent falling out together, Game was determined to prove that he was the draw of the show and not Dre's cosign or Curtis's star appeal. If we took 50's contributions and put them on The Massacre, where they were initially slated to go, not only would Jackson's follow-up have come within striking distance of Get Rich or Die Trying levels of impact, but Game wouldn't have had the chip on his shoulder to prove himself either. Chuck has always been lethal with the pen, don't get us wrong, but hate it or love it, most of the brightest moments from the Compton natives' debut could be attributed to Dre and 50. Kanye, Just Blaze, High Tech, and Scott Storch all reprised their roles, but even down to the sequencing, it feels like Game is performing a cheap imitation of himself. Commercially, while he would see a dip in first week sales, his 358K was still extremely impressive, netting him his second chart topper. We know a lot of y'all felt Doctor's Advocate was underrated in his ranking, but truthfully, Game hadn't fully healed until 2008's LAX. Cuts like Remedy, Wouldn't Get Far, It's Okay, and Why You Hate the Game are evidence that Chuck has one of the most consistent and fleshed out discographies of the 21st century, but the album as a whole? Well, aside from proving haters wrong about his source of success, Doctor's Advocate feels purposeless and empty. Far removed from the personality and ingenuity displayed on tapes like Jesus Peace and Born to Rap. Simply put, if you're going to prove you can do it on your own, One Blood isn't enough to make us forget about Hate It or Love It, How We Do, or West Side Story. Number 3, Jay-Z, In My Lifetime, Volume 1. Very few artists can drop a classic their first time out. Even fewer find that same debut being hailed as one of the genre's greatest. Reasonable Doubt was certainly a modest commercial success, but the credit it afforded Jay as an MC can't be overstated. Rather than being engulfed in Biggie's shadow or as a footnote to Illmatic's success, Hov showed he could comfortably maintain his own lane. Being the shrewd capitalist he is though, Jay definitely saw the grass was greener on the radio-friendly side of the business. If Dead Presidents 2 Jay knew that Volume 1 was going in the direction of Sunshine, he might have actually gone through with that early retirement. The standout cuts on this one certainly epitomize diamonds in the rough. We're still saying Rhyme No More if the question involves Jay's best intro. Not to mention B-sides like Where I'm From, Rap Game, Crack Game, and You Must Love Me being some of his most underrated through a 30-year career. But the shiny suit era didn't sound good on Jay. We're looking at you, I know what girls like. This ranking is so difficult because the albums and the expectations that came with them are hard to gauge. Volume 1 is a much better album than the likes of Roman Reloaded or Terminate on Sight, but Jay also had a significantly higher hurdle to clear. Not only was the King of New York discussion hotter than ever after the passing of Chris Wallace, but Sean's lifelong frenemy had just dropped a slow-burning classic with It Was Written. Essentially, Hov's floor was still stories above everyone else's ceiling. It also didn't help that Mr. Carter swapped out features like Biggie, Foxy Brown, and Mary J. Blige for acts like Too Short and Puffy. Living legends with little to no musical overlap. Volume 1 would be his last solo LP that failed to top the charts, so while it did lay the groundwork for Hov to become a commercial juggernaut in the game, it did that by serving as one of the game's most forgotten stepping stones. Number 2, Raekwon, Immobilarity. Ah yes, the Purple Tape's successor, or as we like to call it, Doctor's Advocate before Doctor's Advocate. Completely abandoning RZA's production input and his telepathic connection with Ghostface, Raekwon's second studio album saw an irreversible change in the MC's career path and perception. By August of '95, we had already been blessed with 36 Chambers, Tikal, and ODB's return to the 36 Chambers. So we weren't sure how RZA could keep such a prolific and versatile run going. Then he, Raekwon, and Ghost put out a masterpiece that we can only describe as cinematic in its approach and execution. Raekwon and Ghost were probably the most dynamic duo in the game behind Dre and Snoop and maybe Mobb Deep. When you couple that with some of RZA's best production, it's easy to see why Wu-Tang wasn't just for the kids, they were forever. A time traveler arriving in December of '99 probably would have thought Skynet had won. Raekwon without Ghostface? Okay, that's a bit strange, but we can't blame him for wanting to make his own mark, especially since they would basically run it all back with Iron Man shortly after Cuban Links had dropped. But no RZA? RZA was to Wu-Tang what Pac was to Death Row, except his work behind the boards truly brought everyone under one umbrella versus dropping 40 points in a losing effort. Needless to say, Immobilarity struggled even more than fans expected with inconsistent production and underwhelming lyrical performances. Sneakers would be a pleasant surprise from Pete Rock, and we will recommend Casablanca and Fuck Them featuring Method Man, but the pickings are real slim on the 21-track project. While we're not suggesting a shoulder-to-shoulder comparison of the two MCs due to their complementary styles and skill sets, the difference in Ghostface's catalog and Raekwon's is mighty telling, especially when considering that the only other time the chef would come close to this level of critical acclaim would be on the sequel to Cuban Links. Sometimes trying to fix something that isn't broken really can backfire. In this case, badly enough to land at number 2. Even with the monumental fumble that was Immobilarity, there is a follow-up that fell from even greater heights. Before we get to our number 1 on this ranking, make sure to peruse our channel, as we've got lists on basically everyone we've covered today. Ranking solo catalogs on the game, Jay-Z and Nicki, as well as label rankings like G-Unit can all be found on the channel. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a list.
Remember those albums that changed everything? The ones you played on repeat? The soundtracks of your story. Now, they're not just memories, they're wearable. 8 classic albums pressed into every hoodie and tee. For the ones who grew up on that real hip-hop, and the ones who are still catching up, this is more than merch, it's a tribute. Wear what raised you. Available now at shop.culturalisttheory.com.
Number 1, Snoop Dogg, the Doggfather. If you recall back in our Death Row ranking, yeah, we got one for that too, we confirmed that this one was going to make the list. After an extensive deep dive of the biggest flops the game has to offer, we still couldn't find anything as jaw-dropping as the Doggfather. We knew Snoop without Dre was going to be a massive adjustment, but we had no way of knowing that it would truly be the end of Death Row as we knew it. Expecting Snoop to surpass the success he had achieved in '93 would have been insanity, so no, the album's commercial disappointment isn't why it's here. We can't even say that we expected another instant classic from the Dogg because honestly, he and the label had traversed so many obstacles that anything stronger than a good album would have been a miracle. But never in our wildest dreams would we have anticipated such a lackluster effort from one of the most globally recognized artists of our time. Snoop's struggles were obviously bigger than music. After beating a murder case and losing close friends in the midst of a bi-coastal gang war, we can only imagine the strain of trying to recapture that bolt of lightning he had previously had in the studio. But after spinning the 74-minute record, we almost got the impression that the Snoop D.O.G. was laughing at us when he turned in the final copy of this album. You'll never hear us slander Uncle Charlie or the numerous accomplishments he's achieved both in group and as a solo artist. But him appearing on 6 of the album's 21 songs made the album feel more like a Charlie Wilson record than a Snoop one. Additionally, Doggy Style stood out because of how deep the impact was from top to bottom. It might not have gone 19 for 19, but it was damn close. The exact opposite could be said of its successor. There were a handful of hot joints on here, namely Up Jump the Boogie, Snoop Bounce, and Groupie, but we'd be hard-pressed to die on a hill calling any of these definitive classics, let alone an impromptu greatest hits. Snoop is best known for his canine affiliation. Luckily for him, he's had more lives than a cat. Reinventing himself with a No Limit, the Neptunes, and even acts like Wiz Khalifa, Snoop has placed so much space between him and the Doggfather that people rarely mention it for the collapse it was. In our game of revisionist rap, however, thinking of Snoop bowing out after the Doggfather is definitely the darkest rabbit hole we can think of. Going from the literal top of the game to not being mentioned at all was a very real possibility for our favorite walking advertisement. Luckily for him and hip-hop fans around the world, the Long Beach businessman is much bigger than the sum of his failures. Alright team, you know what time it is. If you made it this far and you feel so inclined, give us a thumbs up. We thrive on external validation. And let us know down in the comments which albums do you think should have been added to the Sophomore Slump list. Subscribe if you're still on the outside looking in, and remember to stay dangerous out there. It's your man CJ for CT. I'm out.